All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's a beautiful not Sunday afternoon. It's a beautiful I guess it's a Wednesday afternoon here. I'm getting my schedule's all off this week, so y'all are in for quite a show today. They're going to have to get the hook after me today, but it's a beautiful afternoon here in Austin, so hopefully it's nice and sunny wherever y'all are at. But we're gonna kind of spend a little bit of time today talking about things that kind of the events and the goings on, the decisions that were made following the October 15th council meeting. Of course, in those meetings, you'll see that's a kind of an aggregation of all the decisions that the boards have made and that the council then, kind of passes judgment on what it wants to do. But there's been a lot of changes, a lot of proposals, a lot of adopted changes. I don't think it's going to be as scary as you think it would be if you're looking at the agenda. You look at it and you think, oh my gosh, it's a total shifting of the world. It's really not. So we're going to kind of go over that with you today. We're going to talk a little bit about where we're at in the quadrennial rule review. Robert will fill you in on all of that. What's the future? What are the next steps, if you will? And then we're going to talk about the EPPP Part 2 for those of you out in psychology world. And then we're also going to share with you, hopefully this is something that this is the only time you'll ever encounter it and you'll never have to experience it firsthand, but it's kind of a new investigatory process that we've launched. And Patrick's going to talk to us a little bit about that, about why we're there. But just a reminder, what we can't talk about today, you're pretty much free to ask us anything you want to, even if we don't talk about it, you can ask us whatever questions you've got, comments. About the only thing we can't really talk about are pending applications and pending complaints. So beyond that, it's pretty much free reign. Um, just a reminder though, we're not doing CE for this. Uh, just so y'all know, whenever every time I know some people are like, why don't you give CE for this? Because honestly, I'm running about as fast as I know I don't look like I run much if you've ever seen me, but we're running about as fast as we can right now at the agency, trying to keep up with some other big projects that we've got going on. And it is a lot of work, making sure everybody gets the emails or the certification verification that they've got continuing education credit. And I just don't have time. We don't have the time to fool with that right now. So that's one of the big reasons why we're not doing continuing education for this. But hopefully you'll still get some value out of it. Now I'll tell you, I'm going to be here kind of as long as you guys have got questions. I think Patrick and Robert might have to bug out after an hour and a half or 2 hours, but I'm here. I don't know if Sarah and Christina are rideshare hostages with me, but you'll have me until y'all are all out of questions. So I guess with that, let's kind of get going. Let's start talking about the rule changes that were adopted at the last meeting. Um, the first thing, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the one proposed rule that the council had, and it was 881.20. It was rulemaking by the executive council. It's just a typographical or syntax correction. We had some duplicative language in the rule that we were striking out. So you can go look at that rule once it's published in the register. Um, I'm not expecting any comments on it because it's just like I say, it's just a syntax or really a typographical correction is all it is. But now moving on to the adopted rules part, there was a one big change that I want to kind of spend just a little bit of time outlining for you guys on, and that is the council adopted a rule. It's 882.14. I'm going to share my screen now so that everybody can see what it is I'm talking about. Come on, Zoom, catch up with me here. There we go. Okay, so we're all looking at 882.14. This is what we call the petition for waiver remediation deficiency rule. This is a global rule. It applies to all the boards. They can choose to use it if they can choose to use it or apply it in a given situation if they want to. They do not have to. You are not entitled to the relief under this rule. It is really discretionary with the boards before they decide whether or not to grant any kind of relief under this rule. But uh, across all the professions, we have, since BHEC's creation, we've been working to kind of inject a relief valve, if you will, into a lot of your rules so that when people come in, they apply for a license and they meet the vast majority of licensing criteria. But let's say they get hung up on just one minor deficiency, something that if they had just taken some extra steps or some extra done some other remedial type measures to correct it, that we would have no concerns about their safety to practice amongst the public or on the public. And what this rule is designed to do is to recognize those situations, and where somebody is hung up on a purely regulatory requirement, something, i.e., something not in statute but just in rule. Um, you know, give you an example, say some sort of LPC, a particular LPC course. You didn't have a particular LPC course, but you had taken, some other, say you'd taken the same type of course in a marriage and family therapy program or in a psychology program, but it just didn't have the little counseling designator out by it. You could petition for relief under this rule and say, well, look, I didn't do the counseling course, but I did something that was substantially similar to that, and the concepts are the same. So therefore, I'm asking for a waiver, or for you to recognize what I have done that makes me just as safe to practice to the public. So that's really what this rule is designed to do. It is not intended to waive or degrade licensing standards at all. Um, it is meant as a process for the boards to use to ensure that somebody who doesn't meet the technical requirements of the rule nevertheless have the requisite experience, training, and education to safely practice on the public by some other means. So I don't want anybody thinking, oh, well, this is they're just trying to degrade the licensing standards or water down the standards. That's not at all what it is. It's just an alternate pathway to ensure competency, if you will, and safety to the public. I'll tell you what it
Joe,
cannot. Yeah.
sorry, would you mind zooming in a bit?
Oh, sure.
Um,
Sure.
just in case folks want to get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah. And for those of you, if you want to see the substance or the body of the rule, go ahead and download the board meeting materials from the council's October 15th meeting. They're still on the website. They'll be on there for probably years. I don't. I try to. I'm gonna. I think I'm gonna leave stuff up on the board meeting materials for probably, I'd say, at least 2 to 3 years. I may even go as far as 5 years. I haven't quite decided on when I will pull stuff off. But of course, anything even beyond that, you could always email us under open records and get copies of it. But anyway, it's available for download. If you just look under the meeting materials for the council's October 15th meeting, you can download it. You can find this rule. Really, you can find all the rules we're going to talk about here today in those meeting materials. But what this rule is not designed to do, and what it cannot do, is waive some sort of statutory requirement for licensure. So, for example, LPCs, and LPCs, psychologists, I'll pick on both of y'all. LPCs, you guys have to have 3,000 hours of supervised experience. Let's say you come in from West Virginia and you've only got 2,000 hours of supervised experience, but you've been practicing for 20 years out there. And so you're a known quantity. We're not worried about that. You can't petition under this rule for a waiver of the 1,000 hours that you're deficient, because that is a statutory requirement. Same thing for like psychology. If you came in with oh, um, a PhD in counseling instead of PhD in psychology, you couldn't petition for a waiver of that requirement, because the doctoral degree in psychology is a statutory requirement that cannot be waived by the board. It's something set by the legislature. So just kind of keep in mind that there are some things that can be waived, and the only things that are subject to this rule are the things that the board or the council puts in rule. But if the requirement is set out in statute, we cannot touch it. We can't waive it. You can't remediate it. In other words, you can't exchange it for something of comparable value. You can't do that. So you have to meet all statutory requirements. All stop. No exceptions to that. This rule also encompasses, we had built a lot of rules for y'all over the years that allowed certain waivers or deficiencies to be cured in the event the deficiency was caused by a declared disaster. And we saw this in the MFT world during COVID, when you couldn't get your face-to-face, all your face-to-face hours. I think you could only have like 500 or 750 remote uh, remote hours, and a lot of that got waived when we asked for the governor to suspend the rule, and which then allowed us to waive that requirement for you so that you could rely on more um, remote practice supervised experience. So that's still in here. It's now in this global rule. I think what you'll probably see in the future, now that we have the global rule in place, we'll slowly start pulling that stuff out of the various board rules, because we don't want just a bunch of duplicative rules. None of them conflict with one another. They're all now just kind of the rules that are sprinkled in the various professional rule books have now kind of been superseded by this. There's not really much of a need for them anymore, so we'll slowly start to walk those back as we have more time to look at it, and as we kind of get some distance between us and this quadrennial rule review, and we have some bandwidth open up. But just kind of the process to let you know, this is not going to be something that if you have a deficiency that staff are going to look at it and go, oh, but he has this other thing over here that we think would be comparable. You're going to get a denial or a letter from staff saying you're deficient in this particular area, and if it's not cured, you'll be denied. It's then incumbent upon you to ask for this rule, to petition the agency for relief under this rule. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, there is no magic language. You don't have to use any sort of magic phrasing, if you will. It's just, hey, I'd like y'all to consider. It can be in an email, it can be in a letter. I don't want it over the phone. We're not going to deal with that over the phone. It needs to be in writing, because I'm not going to get into a he said, she said type argument over what you asked for and what, our interpretation of it. But again, don't get hung up. This is not designed to be a procedural gotcha. It is designed to be very loose and easy to use for you and us. So don't get hung up on that. In fact, it's not like you even have to cite the rule. It's handy if you do, because it jogs our memory. But if you don't, we ought to be able to, staff ought to recognize, oh, what they're asking for is remediation here, or some sort of kind of change off, if you will. But anyway, enough about that. Like I said, I'll be happy to answer any questions you've got once we get to that. But that's the big rule. That was kind of the big thing we were waiting to see if it was going to pass. I know we've already had some people benefit from the rule. There were some people at psychology, and I think it may be LPC or social work, who were basically, their applications were held in abeyance until we could see whether or not this rule was going to pass. And then when it did, the boards had kind of pre-approved um, a remediation plan for them so that we could go ahead and get those folks licensed. So it's already benefiting both applicants, licensees, and the public, because we're able to get folks out there who are clearly qualified. This rule is not about taking an unqualified person and making them qualified. This is about a person that is, we would all agree, yes, they are qualified. They got hung up on some little minor deficiency or administrative, you know, I don't want to say violation, because that's not correct, but it's some sort of administrative deficiency, and we're able to cure it now and move on and get them the license so they can get out there and start treating folks. That's all it's about. There's no nefarious intent here. So, all right, with that, the next item I want to kind of go over with you is it's going to be 882.21 license status. This is really just kind of some cleanup. It has more to do with we wanted to make sure we there was some confusion in the rule about, we had some language in there that said you can only practice if you have a license on active status. Well, that's not really true. If you were on restricted status or you were on a probated status, you could still practice. So we needed to clear that up. We had some kind of internal inconsistencies in the rules that we need to clean up. Substantively, this is not going to be anything that y'all are going to feel, because it was more of, we recognize we weren't applying it in such a way that it was causing y'all problems. But when we read it, we were like, oops, we got some language there that's a little problematic and maybe needs to be tightened up a little bit. So it's not anything y'all are actually going to feel. It's just a cleanup on our end so that it reads the same way we're operating, is really what that's for. And it also helps, we've made a recent change in our rules so that if you catch a complaint while your license is delinquent and about to expire, once upon a time, once your license expired, we would lose jurisdiction over you, and we weren't able to prosecute that complaint again unless you tried to reinstate it. Well, now what some of this rule change does, and in conjunction, I think, with another, is it allows us to keep your license on life support long enough to dispose of that complaint. And then if we end up sanctioning your license, well, then we go ahead and we sanction it, we impose a sanction, then your license expires or is revoked if revocation is the consequence. So that again, that's what this rule change is intended to do. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. I'm going to just try to provide high level summaries on what these rules do. Y'all have to forgive me. It's going real slow trying to transmit this stuff through Zoom for some reason today. The investigation of complaints. Again, just some clarification language. We want to make it absolutely clear that when complaints come in, they need to provide us with a evidentiary basis for why there was a violation. It's not enough just to say that there was a violation. That doesn't get us there. And we have people that will submit complaints saying, well, he's engaging in fraudulent billing, and you need to go do something about it. Well, we're not going to go subpoena everybody's billing records over your entire practice. That's not fair to y'all. It's not fair to us. That's just trouble looking for a place to happen. And we're not in the job of engaging in fishing expeditions. So what we want to do is we want folks to give us evidence of what the violation is. And then, of course, if they don't, then the complaint gets dismissed. So we're just kind of tightening up the language there and making sure everybody understands what the requirements are about needing to substantiate your evidentiary basis for your complaint. I don't think there was anything else in that. No. Witness fees. We repealed the old rule, put in a new rule. Again, this has nothing to do with, y'all aren't going to feel any of this unless you're like a professional reviewer for us, one of our hired experts. Even then, you're not going to need to study this rule because it more directs staff on how we process those things and how what we pay and that kind of thing. So just letting you know, we made a big change there, but it's not going to impact all of you. The new fee rule, really the only thing of any substance here that I want to point out is the new MFT temporary license rule. We've got, that's out there now, and we've got the fee associated with it. I'm trying to remember. Oh, this rule is, I can't see where it is now, but it's on here. So I know it's on here somewheres. Robert, where am I looking at here? There it is right there. Yeah, the temp license. It's $103. It's the same as the psychology temporary license. That's what it's modeled after. The MFT rule is actually a little bit better than the psychology temporary license rule. Psychology has a funky statutory component to it that says a temporary license holder has to have a quote unquote supervisor here in Texas. Now we've kind of watered that down to mean consultant rather than actually what all of you would think of as supervisor. Luckily, the MFT rule didn't have any of that kind of verbiage in it, so we didn't have to put that kind of a requirement. But the MFT is a little bit cleaner and neater than what the psychology one is, but they're priced the same. So that's live and running right now. It actually has been for a while, I think. So anyway, just take a look at the fee chart whenever you get a chance. Not a lot of big changes on it. Let's see, and I guess that was it for me. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think that's it for me right now. I'll let Robert. I'm going to turn it over to Robert now, who can kind of fill everybody in on. Let me stop sharing on the rest of the rules. So, Robert, take it away.
Can do. So the rest of the rules were really things that came out of the 4-year rule review process, which I'll talk about in a little bit, where we are on that. I'll just talk about the sort of main substantive ones that might attract people's interest in psychology. For the qualifications for licensure to be a school psychologist, there had previously been a very understandable provision put in place to allow for students who are coming out of school and applying for a license to work for a period of 45 days until they got their license. That was back when it was taking a lot longer to get your license, and it was an attempt to try to bridge the gap. Unfortunately, when we looked further into it, there's just really no statutory basis to allow anyone to work outside of an educational program without having a license. It's just not allowed. And so we are proposing taking out that part of the rule. Now, we are adding language to make sure it is very clear when students are finishing their degree program, if they have started an internship in a school or started a practicum or some other sort of setting, just because they walk and graduate and go through their graduation ceremony does not mean they have to stop that internship right away. They can finish out the planned program, recognizing the school year may continue past that university graduation date. So they can finish if they've already agreed to be a part of that. But otherwise, if you know LSSP students, tell them they really need to get on the application process right away. And generally, those who have been able to get their transcripts into us and get the praxis taken, we are issuing those licenses pretty quick. And so our goal is to have you licensed by the fall so that you can start taking those jobs. But so that's the LSSP rule. A similar statutory issue in the psychology license. Statute allows folks coming in from out of state who have worked for 5 years that's all they need to show is they've been licensed 5 years. They don't have to show all of the supervised experience and postdoc years. Our rules had also said, or you can show 3,000 hours of supervised experience. There again, that was not in statute. That was not something that we were directed to do. And so we're removing that language so that it puts everyone on the same footing. If you haven't worked for 5 years in another setting, you just have to meet the same requirements that everybody else does. So those are the big ones in psychology. Well, I guess one other of note is for those who are taking, if you know folks taking the jurisprudence exam, the board is proposing to lower the pass rate from 90% to 85%. They did a study of the pass rates and looked and felt like that was a more appropriate target. In the MFT rules, a lot of the adopted rules are things that were identified similarly this summer through the rule review process, where the board had previously been, there's a certain amount of practicum and school hours that you're required to get. There are a certain number of post-doc supervision or post-graduation supervision you're required to get, and the board was trying to allow you to sort of blend those or to count hours from one to another. Again, that's not in statute. So the MFT statute specifically requires all of the supervised experience to be earned after a degree is earned, and we don't have the authority to change that. And so the rule changes are meant to align the rules more closely with statute. Now, the board did recognize that some folks will have already started their degree programs, and so some of the changes are what we call grandfathering. So if you've already started your degree program this year, those rules will not affect you, and you'll still be able to take advantage of the policies and practices that the agency has been operating under. There are a bunch of other proposed changes. Those are all looking at the language of the rules, things like advertising names, corporate business names. the intent of a lot of the rule review process was to identify things that were less enforceable, less concrete things where we may unintentionally have been tripping you up as licensees. And so the focus is going back to the main principles that you as a licensee are responsible for your conduct, not the conduct of outside parties that may have other ideas. And you are responsible for not committing fraud, committing misrepresentations, benefiting from people's misunderstandings. The basic principles that you were taught in your ethics courses as licensees, and that's what we're really focused on when we're looking at complaints of that behavior. Let's see, similar, there were no adopted rules under LPC, but similar proposals were made of the LPC rules regarding ethical requirements and financial relationships, business names, use of advertising, things that were meant to, again, clarify the language about what standard you're being held to, and make sure the rules are clear on that. And then a broken record, I'd say the same thing for social work. They're all the same kind of provisions. There was an adopted rule in the social work rules that helps clarify the question of independent versus private practice, and particularly in social work licenses, it is very key that in most of the settings for bachelor and master's level social work, you are in an employed setting, and you are not working independently unless you have gotten that independent practice recognition. And the rule is, we've added some language to clarify that particularly clinical social work must be done in that employed setting under proper supervision, or in a supervision plan if you are working toward your LCSW. But we also clarified that in this new modern world, in the virtual settings we all are in right now, we recognize that you may be directed by your employment setting to work from home or work remotely, and that is not something we would consider to be independent practice or private practice. You're not opening up your own practice when you do that. You're following the direction of your employment setting. So those are the big ticket rules. Christina and Sarah, though, were there any other? I went through pretty quickly. I didn't know if there were any other ones you thought were worth highlighting to the group.
It might be worth mentioning for the MFT rules, they had proposed adding a requirement for crisis management in the continuing education, but at their September 27th meeting, the board recommended withdrawal of that proposal, and the council approved the withdrawal of that rule.
Good point. Yeah, thanks for reminding that. So the MFT board is going back and looking at their continuing education rules again. I think that discussion will probably come up at their board meeting, and so stay tuned. I think they may even send out a survey. So if you hold an MFT license, be on the lookout for a survey to get your input about continuing education topics. But that is, they're taking a pause and really looking at that rule before they move forward with any changes to it. So that's all I'll say about the specific rule proposals and adoptions that happened at this last council meeting. Happy to answer any questions folks have at the end of this about specific ones. In general, the quadrennial rule review that you probably read about and heard us talk about over the summer, that process is concluded now. We have completed the rule review, the review of our rules. We took in all of the feedback from the various town halls and the emails we've gotten and the board meetings, and we greatly appreciate all of you who provided input. While the rule review itself is completed, the impact on our rules is just beginning. This package of rules that came to the council in October were the easiest and most important, in some sense, of statutory changes, things that needed cleaning up. Those came right away. But we now start the work of taking all of the input you've given us on things that you would like to see changed. And each of the committees, the rule committees for each of the boards, will take the next several months to look at those comments and think about which rule changes they are interested in making. I am guessing that based on how busy things are right now, we will probably not have any proposed rules coming up for discussion in the January meetings of all the boards. We might have one or two that make it a priority, but in general, we will probably take the next several months and consider the legislative session that's about to start in January. And we will take the spring to look at and develop these potential proposed rules, and it will be at the next sort of April, May, June meetings that we would have what I'd say is the next wave of rules that come out of the rule review process and proposals. But I will also say, no matter how long it takes, we've committed that every comment that was received, the board will look at. We will look at the comments and they will consider them. They may not choose to take any action on them, but we will consider all of them. And so that process, I would firmly expect, will take the better part of another year to get through all of the comments. So that's where we are in the rulemaking process, which takes up a lot of our thought and time, and certainly I know is something that y'all pay attention to because it impacts your practices. A couple of other hot topics, though, that y'all may have heard about the EPPP. And so, Daryl, what do you want to share about the status of the EPPP Part 2?
Well, I'll just kind of tell you where it is right now. The mandate is off currently. In other words, they have paused, to borrow their words, ASPPB's words, they have paused the mandate. So Texas and the other 49 states in the US and 10 provinces in Canada will not be required to adopt the Part 2 come January 1st of 2026. Now, ASPPB has indicated that instead of mandating two different parts of the exam, Part 1 and Part 2, they are now going to explore a process of what they call reimagining the EPPP. And I think what they mean by that, when you listen to them, when you read their letter, what it sounds like their reimagined EPPP will be is a combined exam. So it won't be two parts. They will mash the two together. And it will be a single exam that consists of both knowledge-based questions and I hear people say skills-based questions, but I've also heard people say it's more knowledge of skills questions. So I don't want to get into that kind of academic argument here, but in essence, it looks like they're going to try to do is to create a combined exam that has both types of questions in it. The launch date on when that is, nobody really knows. ASPPB has pledged to engage in a much more collaborative effort in the design of this reimagined EPPP. I think they've kind of missed the boat in that they just went ahead and said, we're going to do a reimagined EPPP. Here's what it will look like. Now we want to collaborate with our stakeholders to basically tell us why we were right in coming up with this yet again solution to it. But that's just the pessimist in me. We'll see how it shakes out. I want to back up, and for those of you that I see some people out in the audience like Sarah Lorenz, I know you've kept up with us a lot on this, but excuse me. I apologize, everyone. I want to back up and kind of give you just a quick background. So ASPPB owns the EPPP, the licensing exam for psychology. And they decided back in October 2022, that they were going to mandate the newly developed Part 2, which is the skills-based part of it. That obviously caused a lot of consternation and frustration with states because it is a barrier to it is a barrier to entry into the profession. And oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. It is a barrier to entry in the profession, and it increased the cost significantly to come into the profession. It's an additional $450, and it has a pretty high fail rate right out of the gate. The initial pass rate is pretty low. There was a lot of pushback. ASPPB ignored that pushback for about 2 years, and then once Texas, and honestly, Robert gets a lot of the credit for this because Robert came up with a solution of, well, what if we do a bylaw change? We change their bylaws so that they cannot mandate this second exam on us. So we filed the bylaw change. We filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission. We basically used every avenue we had available to us to apply pressure to ASPPB. 8 days before the meeting, at which the bylaw was going to be voted on in Dallas 2 weeks ago, this meeting took place 2 weeks ago, they decided to pause the mandate. And that's when they did a pivot and said, okay, we're going to reimagine the EPPP now. Well, that naturally sucked a lot of the wind out of our sails. You know, our bylaw change was geared towards stopping them from mandating it. We went ahead forward with the vote because we felt like the exam is the exam's problematic, but there's a much more important issue that needs to be settled with ASPPB, and that is who gets to decide what is the right licensing criteria for Texas. Is it the Texas agency, the psychology board and BHEC, or is it ASPPB, who is not accountable to any of you, to any of the elected officials, whether it be the legislature or the governor's office? You know, if I do something stupid, y'all can go tattle to the legislature or the governor's office and I get fired. If ASPPB does something stupid, you can't tattle to anybody, and yelling at me doesn't do you any good. So there's a big, we felt like there was still a sufficient reason to go forward with the bylaw change. We did, because we felt like there needed to be some restrictions put in on the board, on ASPPB's board, so that they couldn't do this again. If not to us, to some future board. And to, you know, at some point this is going to come up again. We wanted to cut that avenue off. We pressed our bylaw change. We lost. There were 11 other states that joined us, though. Roughly 1/3 of the membership agreed that yes, or voted in favor of the bylaw change, but 26 did not, and 1 state abstained. So I think it was, you know, we lost that, but we did manage to push ASPPB into pausing the mandate. So that's a win in and of itself. That is certainly a positive development in the case. It doesn't address the disconnect between that board and the members of ASPPB, though. So where does that leave us now with the EPPP? Well, if you remember, you know, one of the things we had also been doing, we had a parallel backup plan that in case we ever lost the bylaw vote, we had also asked the legislature for funding to develop an alternative exam, not a substitute exam, but an alternative exam to the EPPP, something we would accept in addition to the EPPP for psychology licensing purposes. Well, that's still pending before the legislature, and that's something that the legislature is going to have to decide. The board and the council are not going to withdraw that request for funding, because I think there's still a lot of legitimate concern about the relationship between the ASPPB board and its members. In other words, do we really trust them? Is there enough accountability within ASPPB's governance structure such that we would trust them to not make these kinds of decisions and impose these top-down mandates on us again in the future? And the answer to that is, I think, no, there's not. And until there is some type of accountability for that board to the member jurisdictions, I think the Texas Psychology Board and the council, and I think probably the legislature, may want to have more of a say and kind of be, you know, the the arbiter of our own destiny and maybe not leave that to another organization. So where I'm going with all this is the EPPP2 is on pause. You will not be required to take and pass that exam to be licensed in Texas. We are still moving forward with our request for funding to develop an alternative exam, but that ultimate decision is going to be left to the legislature. Where right now, what I'm planning on doing is laying out the pros and cons of going each direction, saying if we don't develop an exam, here are the pros and cons of just going with whatever ASPPB hands us or mandates that we use. If we do develop an alternative exam, here are the pros and cons of that. And then ultimately the legislature needs to decide what they want to do. You know, and then we kind of go from there, but that's where we are on the EPPP. Robert, I stumbled around that. Anything you want to fill in?
Nope, I think that's it.
And I will say that I know y'all don't, the ASPPB meetings are not open to the public like our meetings are. They are not a governmental entity, so they are not subject to the Open Meetings Act or the Public Information Act. I will tell you this: I've been in some hard meetings before at Psych Board and over at the Capitol, but that meeting was the most awkward meeting I have ever attended because it really pit a significant portion of the membership against the current board at ASPPB. And I mean, we all know each other. You know, you get to know your counterparts from other states because you see how they do. You learn from them. You learn what to do and what not to do, and you get to know them personally. You know their kids, their spouses, and all that kind of stuff. And yet you find yourself at odds with somebody who you've become friends with and who you're definitely colleagues with. And then it also had the strange effect of creating really strange bedfellows. At that meeting, something happened that I haven't seen on a national level anywhere else, and that is New York actually gave Texas authority to vote on its behalf. And so when Robert stood up to cast the vote for Texas, he was not only voting for Texas, he also voted for the great state of New York and the great state of Iowa. Both of them had given him proxy authority to vote on their behalf. Florida attended the meeting for the first time in as long as I've been going, since 2011. So I had never seen Florida there before. California didn't attend, but California, as of is either Thursday or Friday of last week, they had adopted the Part 2, but since this change in ASPPB's position, they have now walked that back. They are no longer mandating Part 2. So we didn't. I wouldn't say we captured the castle or we captured the flag, but we definitely forced a retreat from that other position. From the position, the mandate, if you will. And that's going to benefit not only us, but it's going to benefit a lot of other states, because there were a lot of states that felt the same way we did. But anyway, enough about that. So that's the update on the EPPP. I would expect y'all would have some questions on it. I'll try to answer anything we can once we get to the Q&A part of it. But other than that, it was exciting. I'll say that. It was just very incredibly awkward. Very, very awkward. Which is odd for an organization made up of people who are supposed to be able to handle awkward situations and be able to talk to you about awkward things. It's the strangest thing to sit through. But anyway, all right, I'll shut up now so that we have time for Q&A. Patrick, you want to talk to us about the investigatory process?
Yeah.
Well, Patrick can't figure out how to get off mute. Okay, there he goes.
I can try to share screen. I was trying to share screen and unmute at the same time, and you apparently can't do that. Let me see if you can see, here is obviously the council's website, and if you go down to the discipline and if you go to the website and you click on the discipline and complaints web page, you can scroll down and there will be a link here to this flow chart for the complaint process. And so this is so anybody can look at this flow chart later after we speak. It's there for anybody to see, but this is a general explanation of the new sort of enforcement process that the council the staff will take to investigate complaints and try to resolve them. And so some of the big changes really are that when the complaint comes in, an investigator is going to first get assigned to it and look at it and determine, do we have jurisdiction? Is there a potential violation identified here? If there's not, it's going to go down that first column down to a possible dismissal, where it gets reviewed by management and enforcement. It gets reviewed by legal, and it can get dismissed by the executive director. And that, if it goes down that path, you'll probably, as a licensee, never hear about the complaint because there's nothing there to investigate, and so we'll close it out. But if it goes on and the investigator does see, well, there's potentially a violation here, what they'll try to do is reach out to you, the licensee, by email initially. And so if you've provided us an email address, we will try to contact you by email and say, a complaint's been filed. We'd like to get a written response from you so we can investigate this further. We can send you a secure link so you can download information about the complaint and then give us a response. I know some people have maybe mentioned some concerns about, thinking that it might be a phishing or some sort of scam email. Certainly look at the email address that comes to you. Is it a .gov email address? Is it a bhec.texas.gov email address? That's something that should indicate it's legitimate. You can also call the main phone number to follow up and make sure, is this a real person? Did this actually, is this something that am I trying to be scammed here? Or is this something that's a legitimate complaint they're trying to investigate? We're trying to speed up the process through email, through sending out emails to get responses that way. But if we don't get a response, we then will have to follow up with a written request. And I can't stress enough, if you will please submit, please keep your address up to date with us, as well as your email address, because that's the only address we have, and that's the address we have to send it to. And so if you've moved and you've not given us a new address, we don't know how else to find you. And so by rule, we have to send it to the address you've given to us. So if you'll give us a written response, statistically speaking, I'd have to remember off the top of my head, but I want to say about 85% around there, maybe it's 84%. Of complaints that are filed don't result in a disciplinary action. I think it's somewhere about 16% do. And so that leads me to conclude that if people will take the time to fully respond to the complaints, we oftentimes as staff see both sides of the story and are able either to work out a resolution or to dismiss the complaint because we realize there isn't actually a violation there. But that being said, going further along with the flow chart, the investigator will then take the response, take the complaint, and then send a recommendation to legal, whether it's to dismiss the complaint or to further investigate and possibly sanction the licensee. The attorneys will look at that. The management enforcement will forward that to the attorneys, and then they can then send a possible agreed order to resolve it. If the agreed order isn't entered, then the next step would be to go to, before what's called an ISC, an informal settlement conference. And that's where, depending on the type of violation, it might be before board members or staff, where you can present your side of the story, your side independently. It's not a hearing. It's not a full-blown hearing where you're cross-examining witnesses. It's just you get to speak on your behalf and say, here is my side of the story, and if it's board members or staff that are present, let me ask you questions, and after that you'll leave, and they'll typically deliberate and make a decision as to, we think a violation did occur or did not occur. If they believe it didn't occur, then it'll go through the dismissal review process again. If they do think violation did occur, there's an opportunity to resolve the case with an agreed order. And if that can't be reached, then the last stop there is it goes for a full contested case at the State Office of Administrative Hearings. And that's where you would have a full-blown hearing to present evidence before an administrative law judge. So that's a broad overview of sort of the steps that it goes through. But again, I can't stress enough, helping the enforcement staff by keeping the addresses up to date and giving us some sort of response could really help resolve some of these issues, because unfortunately we've had instances where people have either neglected to respond or just never updated their address. And these complaints have to keep moving through this complaint process, and they've resulted in discipline when, you know, sometimes, or they've ended up in worse situations if they would have just updated their address or provided us a written response. We could have either resolved them much earlier, or ultimately the licensee may not have been disciplined. So that's just to let everybody know, it's very helpful to keep those addresses up to date, email addresses up to date, and try to help us, you know, provide a full and complete written response to the requests for information regarding complaints.
Thank you, sir. I guess with that, let's go ahead and jump into the Q&A so we give folks some time. If you've got any, we got a couple of people with hands up right now, but if you got a question or comment that you want to ask us or share with us, just go ahead and use the raise hand feature. Those of you that are calling in by phone, I'll try to get, if I have time, I'll get to you at the very end, but use the raise hand feature and then we'll call on you. And we're not timing you on the comments like we do in meetings, but just try to keep it, you know, try to keep it succinct and brief so that everybody behind you has time. All right. Kate Walker, you have a question for us?
I do. First of all, thanks for all the information. Appreciate it so much. Christina, check your email for a date. All right, I want you to come talk to our group. Good. So I'm going to say back what I heard you say about grandfathering in for MFTs currently enrolled in school. They can still graduate with an hour's deficiency and get licensed, and then complete the deficiency with their, I mean, the way it stands now, it's still good, right? Is that what I heard you say? I'm sorry, Robert.
Yeah, no, I'll make sure I'm very clear. It is, let me pull this up. It's a specific rule.
Because there's a couple of hours things, so I'm going to ask you another one about hours after this one.
Yeah, no, let me make sure I'm very specific because I don't want folks to get confused. Okay. Sorry for the delay.
It's okay.
Okay. So I'll just go through them. On Rule 801.114 on academic course content, we have to repeal the very last D that says someone who has a deficiency in pre-graduate internship months, that we could issue them a license, but
Right.
then have them make that up. We have to repeal that because we cannot issue somebody a license with an admitted deficiency and then hope they cure that. So that's just repealed.
Which grandfather and folks who are currently in school. Is that what I heard you say?
Well, so for the grandfathering is in 801.142
Okay.
on supervised clinical experience. The part 4 currently allows students to count graduate internship hours exceeding the requirements toward the minimum 3,000 hours of supervised clinical experience.
But that's something different. Right?
Right.
I mean,
So
excess practicum, not a deficiency. That's why I'm asking, because it sounded so similar.
Yes.
I wanted to make sure.
Yes, no, thank you for clarifying. So if you have a deficiency in the practicum, we cannot give you a license and then have you make it up. But you can apply under the new remediation rule to say, I think I have enough experience or this other thing, this other internship that I think makes up for the difference. If you have a deficiency in the postgraduate supervised experience, if you don't have 3,000 hours, you may currently count excess graduate internship hours toward that. That will be going away. That is
That's
only for
going away.
students. That's only for students who are already in the program this year.
And that's what
If
goes
you-
away September 1st, 2025.
Exactly.
Okay, but that's not the same thing as the rule now, where if they graduate with a deficiency, you could issue them a license and then they could get more hours, right? I mean,
Correct. That is
but that's not
not
grandfathered in at all.
grandfathering.
That just ends now.
That just has to end now.
Perfect. That's what sounded funny to me. So, okay, so no grandfathering in if you graduate with the deficiency, but you're grandfathering in till September 1st, 2025 if they have excess hours.
Exactly. Because we recognize some people may have chosen a program knowing or enrolled in courses with the expectation I'll get extra hours and then I'll use them toward my licensure. We don't want to cut them out of what they had planned on.
Okay, I have one more question. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, it's about the supervisor ad form. So we were unclear about, do we need to still send in the form if a supervisee wants to add or drop their supervisor, since all of that's online now anyway? Like, do y'all still want a piece of paper, or can we just do it online? Sarah's
I'll let
looking, yes.
Sarah, you want to answer that one?
So the module that allows a supervisor to manage their supervisees through our database is in its infant stages.
Mhm.
And so we are still relying on that paper form
Okay.
with the signature to establish when that supervision was approved.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, ma'am. Kathleen, you have a question for us?
I sure do. Daryl, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
And first, let me thank you all, Daryl, Christina, Patrick, Robert, and Sarah at BHEC for your due diligence on a job just well done. And my prayer is that you all enjoy a great holiday season as you wrap up 2024. And AMP looks forward to serving our members in 2025 as well. But this comment I'm going to read, Daryl, and for BHEC, is from one of our AMP members, Dr. Dawn Irons. She could not attend today's meeting due to a family emergency, so I will be reading her question for your consideration. And I
Okay.
kind of think I know how you're going to respond, Daryl, but for just the sake of putting it out there, here we are. Many national professional counseling organizations have made it very clear in their position statements, pushing the gender affirming care, including minors, as the acceptable standard of care. This now runs afoul of Senate Bill 14 in Texas. We've talked about this before, which bans gender affirming care in minors. This also includes written letters for minors, which I am confident the Texas legislator will firm up in 2025. Dawn's question is this: how can the state separate itself from these professional organizations that have zero authority in Texas? And are they steering Texas clinicians toward unethical and reportable offenses against their licenses, even though we all know that we are bound to our BHEC rules and regulations? Dawn continues to say, it seems the legacy professional organizations have zero authority and perhaps even zero tolerance for state statutes when it comes to issues like this. Many leaders on our professional boards are members of these various organizations that seem to be in conflict with our state codes. How will the state boards disentangle themselves from these organizations that create questionable ethical scenarios for Texas providers? It would seem that an appropriate conversation be had at each board meeting in 2025 to allow the licensee to hear the discussion from their applicable boards. And this is from Dr. Dawn Irons.
Okay. I think it's the very first thing that comes to my mind when I hear that. I appreciate Dr. Irons submitting that. I think that probably might be something I would encourage her to submit that to the board, to the LPC board or whatever board she's. I don't know if she's licensed with us or not.
Yes, she is.
And I would also consider or ask her to submit that as a public comment to the council as well at its next meeting, so they can hear that. But I want to make it clear, neither the boards or the council are entangled with the associations. In other words, we're not controlled by the associations in any way, shape, or form. Now, I understand. I think probably where you're coming from, and I'm reading between the lines here, is you may have members of the board who are also members of a professional association, and that therefore, and kind of by virtue, there's influence passed through that way. Maybe so. I can't. I'm not really going to comment on how much of a person's membership in a particular outside organization influences their decision. Just based on my experience as the ED, I tend to think it doesn't as much. I will say this, I think I don't know that it would be right though for a state agency to not listen to each and every one of its state associations, including AMP. I think it's important that we be attentive and we listen to all of our stakeholder groups, because y'all are going to be the ones that kind of ring the bell, either when something needs to be done or when we're kind of maybe running afoul of whatever the professional standards are. Now, I don't think necessarily y'all's input. This is just Daryl talking now. I don't really think state association input is sometimes all that useful when it comes to time to talk about whether something is a statutory violation or not. I think that's more of a question. It's either it is or it isn't. Just for example, those MFT rules that we just went over. I dare say I will bet you that TAMFT doesn't like. They're probably not supportive of those rule changes going through, but at the same time, that's what the statute says, and so that's what we have to do. But I don't see I guess the undue influence, if you will, because that's really what we're talking about here, some sort of influence. I don't see the undue influence by the associations that she seems to be intimating, but that's fine. You could argue I'm part of the system and therefore, I'm tainted by that as well. I get that. I'm not offended by that if somebody says that, but ultimately at the end of the day, if you feel like that certain associations or certain groups are having an outsized influence on board decisions, then your remedy is to go over to the legislature and have legislative changes made, because they set the guidepost for what we can and can't do. Really doesn't matter what the board members want to do if the legislature says thou shalt do this or thou shalt not. Once you set a legislative framework, we have to play with inside that framework. We have to do what they say. Two, another parallel solution to that is throw your hat in the ring for appointments to the board. I mean, those are your two most effective things at affecting, making changes within the board, if that's what you want to see, or if you feel like needs to happen, is talk to your legislator and then put your name in the hat for consideration to appointment to the board. And those are outside our sphere of influence, so nothing we do or say can influence that. I think that's the most effective way that I would tell Dr. Irons most effective remedies I would tell her to pursue if that's the changes she wanted to make.
And Daryl, can I add just one additional?
Yeah.
The thinking of the associations and their stance on issues, their stance on political or non-political issues. One thing I think it's important for everybody to understand is on our investigation and complaint side, we do not look to associations or outside entities, ethical guidelines or publications as evidence of whether someone violated our rules. So, I had somebody earlier talking to me a different case and was sort of talking about, well, this violates APA's standard. It's like, well, that's not our rule. Our rule says this language. That's what we hold you as licensees to. And so I just wanted to make sure that was clear for everybody.
Yeah. Anything else, Kathleen?
No, that's what I figured you'd say. But hopefully, but that's what I appreciate that because there is a gray area. And I think being in the trenches here, we're seeing more of that influence, which is a conflict, which gives therapists a conflict of what they should do because they're not paying attention to the BHEC rules and regulations and also the
Mhm.
state statutes. So that's the rub, I think, with Dawn's position on this. And so I don't know how to fix that, other than we're going to fix it the way that we usually do at AMP. But I appreciate that. But I wish, I guess it would just be nice to have the actual board members, especially professionals, to make that clarification. We abide by the state statutes, and that's why we're here on the board. I've
Mhm.
never heard that. So I think that would help a long way on just about everything because it would also help BHEC too. So,
Okay.
and then one more thing for me personally is, I know that there's been difficulty with people who drive a very long distance to do a 3-minute public comment. And I will say that I can only attest for me that I prepare quite a bit to get it under the 3 minutes. And usually what happens more times than not, I don't get it completed, even though I've rehearsed it a bazillion times. So
Yeah.
if there could be a leeway for the people who drive a really long way and actually attend your live meetings, a little bit of grace, I would be very, very grateful.
Okay. I'll certainly pass that along to the chairs, not just LPC board, but all the chairs, and we can certainly visit about it. I'll just tell you, Kathleen, from a very practical concern. I mean, the ledge gives people who attend legislative hearings that they get 3 minutes.
Right.
And they don't even do the virtual comment like we do. So we kind of go even above and beyond what the legislature does in committee hearings.
Well,
And
I can attest that the live, the Senate stuff, there are more people attending that than there are the board meetings. So
yeah,
if you take that in consideration, I don't think you're going to be spending too much more time, but I really do make an effort to be 3 minutes or under, and I never get it done.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, rarely do I ever come in at my time allotted in front of the House Appropriations Committee either. I just shut up, go on. That's was what I've learned to do. So.
yeah, but I do appreciate y'all. So thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks, Kathleen. Stephanie Taylor, do you have a comment for us or question?
Hi, thank you for actually taking the time to actually let me speak. So
Sure.
my comment is, I know actually it's going to be piggybacking off of the complaint process for us as license holders, but also I wanted to know not to have any type of malice or any type of adversity towards the board, but when we have complaints with the board, I know I can see on the website they have the Texas Rangers that we can report the board to for, I could say public, I could say integrity, and I could say public corruption, but
Mm-hmm.
that probably needs to be, I could say, a little bit more meat to it, if you will, because I know we have the phone number on there, we have the website for, I could say, reporting the board members to, I could say, the Texas Rangers, but do we have any other type of, I could say, agencies where we could actually have complaints go if needed?
You would have to file that complaint, whatever your grievance or complaint was, either with your elected official or with the governor's office.
Okay.
Now, I'll tell you, if you do it with the governor's office, well, really, if you do it with any of them, what they're going to do is they're going to reach out to us and kind of get our side on it. And then how it's handled after that, I really don't know, to be honest with you.
Okay, can that be something also too that's gonna be put, I could say, updated on the website? Because I know I just see the Texas Rangers, but I could see even reaching out to the governor's office too could be that step. Let's say for it's the first step in the process.
Well, I guess you could. Let me tell you a very practical problem with this though. What I've been doing this for 13 years now, and what I have found is people are very willing to complain to their legislator or the governor's office when they simply don't get a decision that they like, not that the decision was wrong. And so I don't want to create a process whereby people are basically complaining about the decision that they received instead of you did something wrong. So like the Texas Ranger one, I put that on the website because they're really there to investigate criminal conduct by the board. They're not going to, I mean, if you call them and say, well, I don't think they decided my complaint the right way, they're probably not going to even look at that because that's not what they're charged with. If there is a breakdown in like the board process, or you feel like the board has abdicated or is not fulfilling its duty, then really your remedy is you talk to your elected official or you talk to the governor's office. But if you're asking me if I am going to put that on the website, I'm not intending to do that. I'll just tell you that I'm not going to do that unless the council wants to do that. Because I just see, I get a lot of people fussing about outcomes that were the right outcome. They just don't like they don't like hearing it. And so I don't want to have to create more work where that now people can go elevate that to somebody else and then it comes back to me and I have to answer it yet again, even though we've probably already dealt with it 2 or 3 times at the staff level. You still have that right. I'm not taking anything from you, but I'm not going to advertise that out there. So that's kind of incumbent upon you to know and you to do. At that, we will have done everything we can do at that point. But if you want to take it another level, you need to contact the governor's office or you need to contact your elected official.
Well, I'm not going to contact, like I said, the governor's office and elected official when I would think it'd be more appropriate to have the Texas Rangers because it's not going to be relevant to a complaint or anything along the lines with myself. But I just wanted to know what the process was because I see it over here with, like I said, the website and also with the phone number, which is 512-424-2160 for the Texas Rangers. Because again, that's just how I just wanted to know about the transparency of it, because there's no point to go back over here and beat a dead horse. If it's about a complaint, that's not going to be my lane. I just want to know about as far as any type of misconduct. I said any type of misconduct or any type of corruption within the board. That would be the Texas Rangers, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
If you're talking about corruption, if you're talking about fraud or corruption, you could also report it to the SAO. They have a fraud and fraud, and I don't know if it's corruption, but there's a fraud hotline and website, and that's on our website too. I've got their number and their contact information there. You can do it through them as well. You can do it through both.
Okay, the state auditor's office?
Yes, the state auditor's office.
Okay, well, I have both. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet. Dr. Rob, you still with us?
Yes, thank you for unmuting me. And hopefully the irony of the board not wanting to put the contact information for who to complain about on their website when we're all required to put the board's information on ours is, well, the optics on that are hopefully not lost on y'all. Speaking of complaints, I see that we've got an update to the web page, and this is excellent that the special requirements for complaints related to court-ordered evaluations are up there. I had a question if the court-connected treatment, parenting facilitation, and educational law information would be put up there and maybe in a summary format of all those special requirements. And then I had a second question about the workflow. Speaking of, where in the workflow box is the investigator going to be actually checking what's going on with the court appointments for those cases where much like y'all, I think a lot of times people are complaining that they don't like the outcomes. Not that somebody did something wrong, but I didn't like the outcome that I got from this judge. So where is that court stuff going to be getting checked in the investigation procedure?
It gets checked at the beginning. The investigator looks at that because that is a predicate to the complaint moving forward. So if the complaint is sounds like it's involving something to do within the court proceeding, then they're going to check that right then and there, because we don't want to send it further into the process and waste a bunch of time if it shouldn't be moving forward. Now, Aaron, what was your first question? I've already forgotten.
Whether
Sorry.
the web page would be getting updated with the other court-connected services and the educational law information, the way the custody evaluation stuff has been updated on there.
I hadn't planned on it. Patrick, how many parenting facilitator type complaints do we get? I don't know that I don't remember seeing one.
There's not a lot. It's a lower number, but it occasionally happens, but it's not as it's just a much smaller number.
Okay. Aaron, we can look at that. I don't know. That hasn't been such a volume problem that it just hadn't hit our radar.
Excellent. And as far as checking, the investigator checking on the court orders, is that going to be, they're going to be asking both the licensee and the complainant, or just the complainant? Because they, from what I've seen in cases, they're only asking the complainant, and it turns out that's not always accurate information.
Well, I mean, you'd ask the complainant first, and then of course, I guess if the complainant doesn't produce it or doesn't mention it and it moves forward, then if the licensee then brings it up, then okay, we'll deal with it then. That's
And
the
then
only
the
way it can
licensee-
happen.
So my concern there is the licensee has to then engage their insurance, and it ends up costing them thousands of dollars in attorney's fees to produce that, okay, here's been the custody ruling from the court that shows what it shows, or, oh, I'm still under active appointment by this court, or, where it's something that shouldn't be costing licensees thousands of dollars and activating their insurance and all of that. To get something that's out there already, and should be, I think, less cumbersome for those of us who are still willing to work with the court connected stuff.
So what's your solution?
Checking with the courts, doing some independent work that way.
How are we going to know if the complainant doesn't bring it up to us, though, or says that no, there's nothing pending?
Yeah, and maybe there's something less formal than every time I've seen this come up, and I have folks reach out to me all the time, it has been we have received a complaint, here's the complaint, and it's we need a response letter. And it's at that stage is the first time that the licensee has heard of anything. And they're saying, I'm still treating this kid. I'm under court appointment. The complainant beat the crap out of the kiddo, and that's why they're in therapy. And now they're just trying to get rid of me. And a lot of it is variations on that. Parents who have supervised visitation and don't like the fact that the court has made certain rulings and they're taking it out on the therapist. That kind of stuff, where there's been no effort to do anything other than, say, well, we've got this complaint, now respond. Where, again, literally thousands of dollars just to show that, no, I'm acting under court appointment with a kid who's been abused or neglected. And that's why there are so few people willing to do this work, I think, quite frankly.
Dr. Rob, can you help me understand why the therapist doesn't have that court order in their records?
They do, but by the time they're being asked for their records, it's in response to a formal complaint. The response to the formal complaint then necessitates reaching out to your insurance carrier and activating your attorney at that point. Whereas they could be asked maybe informally about that, as opposed to the big formal board packet that's got, here's the attached redacted complaint, and we demand your full file, and the whole rigmarole that goes with that.
So that is actually one of the changes we to the investigation process that I think will somewhat address what you're saying. we are having the investigators reach out rather than our attorneys. Up until September, that reach out that you're talking about was a more formal, not only notification of the complaint, but also the attorney saying, based on all the allegations, here are the violations we believe you have committed. Unless you tell us otherwise, we're proceeding. We need your files. We need it formal. That was a notice of violation. Now what a licensee will receive is just a notice of preliminary investigation. And so it will come from the investigator, and it will simply be, hey, we have received this complaint. We're notifying you that we have it. Here it is if you want to see it. Can you give us an informal response back? Now you can certainly obtain an attorney and have a formal response if that's what your desire is, but it does provide the opportunity for someone to very quickly come back to us and say, whoa, you've got the wrong person. I've never treated that person. We're in the middle of a court case. You need to hold off on this. We're in the middle of a criminal investigation. You can't be in here. Whatever it is. And so that is the change to the investigation process. It won't get entirely to your point, but it will provide that less formal option of responding.
Okay, and that's now since September 1st. So moving forward, we should be seeing that informal approach happening, because the rule got adopted more than a year ago now about this, but it didn't seem to change anything. So now the change is actually happening.
We just
So, and
changed
this-
the internal process is what we've done.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that'll make
I'm gonna be honest with you, Aaron. I don't know that things are going to play out the way you think they're going to play out.
sure.
I think probably most people are still going to engage their attorney when they get the letter. I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, I don't think people are going to change and go, oh, well, it's an informal response. So,
Well, I'm hoping we can educate folks that maybe the first step is to say, hey, are you aware I'm under this appointment order and the parent who's complaining got supervised visitation because they're high on methamphetamine 3 out of 4 weekends a month?
yeah,
And that may dissuade the board from going further with things. And for those of us who work with abused and neglected kids, a lot of angry parents out there because that's the whole way the kids got abused in the first place.
yeah.
And fewer people every year are willing to take these cases, and these kids need help. So I appreciate that you guys are looking at that internal process. I just want to point out the protection of the public is both from spurious complaints and from bad professionals.
Yeah, agreed.
Thanks a lot. And I really appreciate that you guys are doing these informal listening sessions and stuff like that. I think this is going to be a more humane process in the next few years if we're lucky.
All right, good deal. Thanks, Aaron. Jennifer Noblet, do you have a question for us or comment?
Yes, hi. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak again. I actually joined and I asked a question back a couple months ago, and I was just checking in to see if there were maybe any additional discussions or updates. So previously I had asked about some discrepancies between the social work rules pertaining to custody and guardianship documentation and how that's in conflict with the family code, the Texas Family Code. And I don't know if this is something that I might see some updates on in the upcoming months with the rules being reviewed, but I thought I would just ask to see if you had anything for me on that.
Yeah. Yes, that is through those comments. It is on our list to look at the specifically that family code provision about, if I'm remembering correctly, about treating minors and that conflict between parents having notification rights, but not necessarily treatment decisions, and then what do licensees, who has access to the records, and so yes, that is,
Okay.
we don't have a solution yet, but that is on the list to delve into.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I want to reinforce that this is an issue that the LCSWs I supervise are experiencing on a daily basis, and that we're having to have ongoing legal conversations with our, our legal representation of our organization, because we don't know how to proceed sometimes with providing these children treatment. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Sure.
No, thanks for bringing it to us.
Let's see. Ms. Lorenz, you have a question or comment?
Hello, yes, I do. So first I want to say to Daryl, you gave me a bit of a shout out earlier, so I'll give you a shout out as well. I want to say thank you so much for the amount of patience that you've had to have with the ASPPB issue, having to tolerate all of this, and frankly, folks like me who come and make a little ruckus out of it. So thank you so much for advocating on our behalf. And frankly, congratulations, because yeah, I do see it as a win that that we no longer have, this mandate. But as you referenced, it's not a public meeting, and so we kind of rely on meetings like this so that we get to know what happened.
Yeah.
We get some PR type of press release. It's written already. They've made sure they know what they're saying and not saying, and it leaves us with a lot of questions. And so I guess that I have one big question is, why did the result of that amount to a withdrawal of the FTC complaint? If we're still saying, look, they've got a monopoly on this situation, why was the FTC complaint withdrawn?
The FTC complaint was based primarily on the tying arrangement between parts 1 and part 2. In other words, you tie the use of one product, the part 1, to your use of part 2. You can't use part 1 unless you use part 2. That's a tying arrangement. And we felt like that was an unlawful monopolistic act by ASPPB. The fact that they have a monopoly, it's a natural monopoly on the test market. The fact that somebody has a monopoly is not illegal in and of itself. And the fact that they can charge monopolistic prices is not illegal in and of itself, per se. I'm not going to get into all of the legal geek stuff here, but with the pausing of the mandate, which I don't think you're going to see. I don't honestly think the mandate will come back. I don't think. I just think they're going to repackage this thing into a different, it'll look different. And with those changes, we just felt like that if we left that, the pending complaint was probably doing us, candidly, it was just doing us more harm in terms of goodwill with our allies. In other words, states that or either allied with us in our positions that we take, or that might have been more willing to consider our position. We think that it might have cost us a little bit in those areas. And so we felt like it was better to go ahead and, withdraw that complaint than to leave it pending. One thing, also, you don't want to waste the Federal Trade Commission's time. If they get to it and they're thinking, oh, there's a tying arrangement here, they start to look at it, and I haven't bothered to tell them, well, that situation has changed, and they get to it and they're like, well, crud, now we've wasted all our time and effort looking at this thing. I don't need the FTC mad at me over that, so that if I ever have to come back to them because ASPPB does something else again in the future, I want them to know, oh, he's got good credit with us. He keeps us up to date on the developments, and he's not going to let us waste our time. So
yeah,
that's why.
Yeah, and thank you for explaining that, because that was not made well known to the public. So that's why I asked. But it sounds like, if I heard you earlier, you withdrew the FTC, but not the alternative exam, which would be for Texas only. which I guess my big question is, okay, if we get the go ahead for this, who is putting this together? Is it a third party? Is it at TSBEP? Who's deciding on the content of what goes into a clinical licensing exam?
Well, what we did is in order to make the request for funding, we needed to know, how do you develop an exam? What's it going to take? And so we submitted something called, or we published something called an RFI, request for information. And we got several test development companies to basically tell us, here's how we would put a test together for you if you hired us. And then we took that process and those cost estimates, and that's what we used to build that $1,050,000 figure that's in our LAR. Now, you ask who would develop it. The way it would work is, if we get the money, we will then publish an RFP, a request for proposal, a request for offer, and we would hire one of these testing companies to basically shepherd the development of this test. Now, it's going to be, you're going to need a lot of subject matter experts. So that's going to come from the field. That's going to come from the profession itself. I fully expect, if that happens, that we're going to be looking for subject matter experts outside of Texas as well, because you want to kind of encourage buy-in from other jurisdictions. You want other jurisdictions to look at it and go, hey, that may be something we would want to accept in addition to the EPPP as well. And so we want to get them involved, psychologists from other jurisdictions, so that they felt like they had some skin in the game too on it. So you're asking who's going to develop it? It's going to be the profession that develops it through the use of subject matter experts, creating like the job task analysis and then item writing, that kind of stuff. Y'all are going to do that as the profession. Robert and I are going to work with the vendor to kind of coordinate those meetings and kind of getting everybody together to collaborate on that. That's where we as the agency staff are going to come in. I am not going to be sitting here writing in my office items for this exam. I know nothing about it, and y'all would laugh at it if I wrote it. But anyway, that's kind of how I'm envisioning it to work. But I just need everybody to understand, before you even get to that, you got to get through the budgeting process. So I don't want everybody putting the cart before the horse and run away and thinking, oh, we're definitely getting it. I'm not saying that. I don't know. Right now, honestly, I'd give it about a 50-50 shot of jump ball right now. I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay,
so,
and I appreciate that
And-
realistic approach.
And we're also, just to make sure everybody knows, we're not walking away from the table with ASPPB, right?
Yeah.
They are pursuing this combined exam. We are
Right.
going to try to engage with that front too.
Right, because when you merge two exams, there's by definition more content, which means if you think that there's already a low passing score, it's going to go even worse. So I guess the question is, okay, if the legislature says, now, you know what, we don't have the money, or we just don't want to do it for whatever reason, so what does BHEC and TSBEP do next? What comes next?
Well, I don't know that there is much choice other than to go with the EPPP at that point. I mean, I'm not trying to sound catty whenever I say this or snarky, but I'm like, what is our other choice other than just to accept the EPPP in whatever form ASPPB mandates or dictates it?
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know that we have another option, to be honest with you. I don't like the idea of going without a test. I think that's a bad idea. But I think the profession would back me up on that too. But I don't know. I don't know that there is another option if the ledge says no. I think, let me tell you this, and I meant to say it earlier. The legislative process has started. I mean, bill filing has begun. It started yesterday. Robert and I are already tracking bills. Yesterday they filed, I just ran a search. There were 1,471 bills filed yesterday. On the very first day, there were over 8,000 bills filed during the 88th legislative session. So I'm telling y'all right now, this is going to be a very, very active session. But if you want to see Texas develop an alternative exam, if you don't want to see the state develop, you need to be contacting your legislator right now. You need to be letting them know what you think and what you want right now. because we're now taxiing down the runway for the 89th legislative session, and you need to kind of get ahead of the game, because if you wait until about February or March, it's probably going to be too late before you start chiming in, because there the budget is going to be pretty well baked. It's just going to be harder to affect any change at that point. So if you want to get involved, you need to be getting involved right now and letting your folks know what you think, or what you want, what you don't want. Is kind of my advice to you.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Well, Daryl, thanks everybody. I got to duck out. I've got another meeting to go to.
Okay. Thanks, Robert.
Appreciate it.
All right. Mary Dainty, you have a question or comment for us?
I do. Thank you. I think my question is an easier pretzel to untwist compared to the other speakers. I know I've brought this up in the past, but will the rules review ever include adding clarification to the 4-hour LPC supervision section? It used to look very similar to LMFT, and then it suddenly changed a couple of years ago. But right now, there is no direction or mandate for how a supervisor can be given discretion on how the associate can make up the missed hour. And to be honest, the conversations that are happening out there among supervisors are wildly different depending on who you ask. And because there is no written clarification, we're all just kind of doing what we think is best.
Kind of having to wing it based
We
on your
kind of
best.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a fair statement. It's okay. You're in a safe spot. Nobody's taking names or anything here. We've got.
It
I'm
is. It's on there.
Is that on
to
the list,
discuss.
Christina?
Yes,
Okay.
it's a hot topic, and it has been for a while. So definitely we're going to be discussing that, the 4-hour and all that fun stuff. And that's where it's going to be really important for everyone to pay attention to the meetings and provide their public comment, because in case something's proposed and it is going to make life even worse, for you all, that's where we need to make sure you guys give us your feedback with that. But it is absolutely going to be discussed.
Hey, and
Thanks.
Mary, that also reminds me, I want to tell everybody else out there, remember, there are like 3 ways that you can give public comment in a meeting. Kathleen mentioned driving down. You can do that. You can appear virtually and do like what you're doing here today. But we also offer the option of it's usually whenever we post the agenda, it's about a week or so before, 9-10 days before. You can submit written comments about whatever you want. And it goes into a little Excel spreadsheet that we then give to the board prior to the meeting. I would really encourage folks, if you don't like talking and if you don't like public speaking and you don't want to come down here and speak in front of everybody, then at least jump on that, use that web form that we have, and leave a public comment. There's no magic language to use when giving a public comment. It doesn't help if you call us, if you're like, Daryl's a moron and I think he should do this. Okay, you're entitled to do that, but I'm probably not gonna lean your way very much. But my point is, look, just if there's something you feel strongly about, use that form, because there's no magic language. Just jump on there, jot down your thoughts, either for or against whatever certain issue or something you think we need to do. This would be a good example of, if you don't have time to actually show up on the day of the meeting, you can do it ahead of time. Or you can still just pen an old-fashioned letter and mail it in if you want to, although I prefer people dump it into that web form because it's much cleaner and easier to consolidate everything. So just everybody keep that in mind whenever we get to this issues like this supervisor thing. When you see it come up on the agenda, drop a comment in that web form. Very few people use that. I mean, very few. I haven't had one on BHEC in a couple of meetings now, I think. So it's just, I figured more people would use it, but they don't. So.
Okay. Thanks, Daryl. Thanks, Christina.
You bet.
No problem.
Sandy Andrews, you have a question or comment for us? Sandy, you with us? Okay. see if. All right, we'll move on here. All right. Maria Quillanton Diaz.
Yes, yes. Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to ask you a question.
Sure.
I am an LPC supervisor. I have
Mhm.
been a supervisor since 2004, so I have a lot to say about the changes, and I would love to include my thoughts in your next agenda. But at the
Okay.
moment, I have one question that pertains to avoiding criminal, in my opinion, criminal charges to our LPC associates. So I find myself in a position where I have associates working for the school system. They are LPC associates working as school counselors. And they're W-2, right? They're employees.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But they're having to restrain children or adolescents in the school system. And if
Mhm.
they don't restrain them, then they will be penalized by the school district. So I asked them to call the liability insurance and ask for their input because they're afraid to restrain a child. I do understand that they need to follow the standard operating procedures for any entity, whether if it's federal, state, or local. So local would be the school system. So that's one. A school counselor working in a school setting as a school counselor, however, she's an LPC associate. The other one is also an LPC associate working for the state where there's male inmates. And they're being asked to also restrain adolescents. And they're afraid, one, are getting hurt while restraining or hurting the adolescent while restraining. I also asked them to look into your code of ethics, and there was nothing about that. I asked them again to call the liability, and there's, of course, they don't have a say-so about that. But my concern is that what if one of those parents decides to place charges on the LPC associates,
Mhm.
and I'm their supervisor, and I'm saying, your job is clinical, is not to restrain either children or adolescents. What is your opinion on that? I know those would be criminal charges, but I see it very unethical because they're having to restrain someone. And to me, that's one dual relationship because they're not there to do that. They're not part of their justice system. What is your opinion on that? Just so that my associates can have a better understanding.
I don't think there's a dual relationship there. Honestly, I think the employer's restraint policy. So a school district is going to have a policy on restraint. I think they're, as an employee of that district, I think they're bound by that restraint policy. I don't think the fact that they are a LPC associate under your supervision, I don't think you can override that. The supervisory relationship doesn't override the fact that they are bound by whatever that restraint policy is. Now, the scenario of working for the state, is this in like a juvenile justice detention
Yes,
facility?
yes, it's a juvenile justice, yes,
Okay. Um,
by the state.
yeah, again, I think the restraint policy for that facility or that agency is going to govern what they must do. I don't think that creates a dual relationship.
So
Um,
let's say they restrain wrongfully and they
mhm,
hurt a child, and the parent then places a complaint against my associate.
okay.
That will go to the board, right?
So that wouldn't be I don't know that we would even have jurisdiction over that because that's not a complaint involving the delivery of services. That's what they're complaining about is a violation of that entity's or that agency's restraint policy. It's going to be something that would either they would handle through some sort of internal grievance procedure that's available to the parent of the child, or through through a civil lawsuit. You know, I guess they could sue the associate for assault. But that's not really that's not conduct that we regulate. That's
Okay.
not the delivery of services. That's just not anything. We're going to look at that and go, well, this isn't even about the practice of counseling. This is
Mhm.
about a restraint issue. So that's that employer's problem, not ours.
So if they do, let's say, get criminal charges, will they be penalized by the board?
I mean, they would have to be convicted of something, and then it would have to be, you'd have to, I mean, it's too hard to say because I don't even, it's without knowing what you're convicted of, I can't really say how it then interplays in the rules.
Well, let's say breaking a leg or an arm.
So that's going to be
or
like assault.
securing-
It's going to be
or
like assault or ag assault.
Right.
But is it directly related to the practice of counseling? Probably not.
No,
I mean, I
no.
don't know how it would be. So,
No. But just the fact that they have a criminal charge.
no, the criminal charge, because we don't require you to report arrest to us. It's
Okay.
only convictions or deferred adjudication. I only want to know what the outcome is. I don't want to know what you were accused of. You're not
Mhm.
required to report that, because so many times what people end up getting arrested for,
Mhm.
either the charges are never prosecuted or it's something totally different altogether that they end up getting convicted for on the back end. So we don't concern ourselves with what the arrest is. It's only what the ultimate outcome is. And then even then, it's going to have to be something that gives us, that has to, there's a very small category of things that we can revoke
Mhm.
based on a conviction for, or it has to be directly related to the practice of counseling. The
Okay.
legislature doesn't want us taking your license. I'll give you an example because this happened at another agency. The licensee scraped off or put a forged or fake inspection sticker on their vehicle, and the agency, it was a healthcare agency, and the agency revoked the individual's license, and it ticked the legislature off to no avail whenever they found this out. And so they changed the law to say, you don't get to revoke or mess with people's license unless the underlying conviction
Mhm.
is directly related to the practice of whatever it is you're regulating. And
Okay.
so that's kind of where they put restraints on agencies, because, you know, it used to be, I remember at Psych Board before that change came about, we would ding people for getting convicted of possession of marijuana. And I'm like, now I'm not trying to get into the whole legalization debate, but I'm like, who cares? I don't
Mhm.
care about that now. And you know, you see that kind of stuff all the time. It comes in through rap back. So we just don't care about it anymore because it's not related to your practice. Now, if you're high sitting in the chair listening to somebody, yeah, I got a problem with that. You get arrested doing that, you're gonna have to come to me and answer. But beyond that, no.
Okay, I just want to make sure that my associates are safe and that they're able to do their diligent duty without being afraid of being convicted or getting fired for not following the procedures of their local and state agencies.
Yeah, yeah. Patrick, you have something to add?
Yeah, I was gonna add, I mean, again, this is extremely speculative, so it's hard to know exactly how this would impact the associates, but I suppose potentially they could be charged with, you know, abuse of a child. And then that would be something that could relate, if they are convicted, that could relate to the license. It's not an automatically means that they would be disciplined, but it would be something that the staff and then the agency might look at later. So it's,
Mhm.
again, it's not, we can't sit here and say, oh, I absolutely know what the result of that would be, but could they be charged and then convicted of something like that? Sure. And could that have an impact? Possibly. But again, they will look at all the aggravating and mitigating circumstances regarding that. I think also, since they're working as a direct employee of TEA, I think most likely they would get a complaint with TEA and they would be the first person to adjudicate that, much like we have LSSPs, they would get a complaint that will be adjudicated through TEA. And then once TEA is done with their process, it may then come to this agency. Because they may find a particular violation or no violation, but their primary role is a direct employee of a school that's regulated by TEA. So they would likely, without knowing all the details and facts, likely have the primary jurisdiction to adjudicate a complaint about something with an interaction with them and a child.
Okay, that sounds fair. Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that. That gives us
Sure.
peace of mind.
Sure. Thank you for calling in. Let's see who we got next. Laura Taff. Laura, you with us?
Oh, hello.
Yes, Laura.
Hi. Yes, I was wondering about because you mentioned LMFT carryover hours from graduate school, and I was wondering if that is a rule for LPCs or if it's just for LMFT.
That is just for MFT.
Do you know why that is?
I don't.
I can tell you that the board did remove that a few years. I think it was back in like 2016 or 17. They did decide to remove that, allowing the excess to roll over. I think they just wanted, an individual to complete those total 3,000 hours and get that experience.
Okay, so do LMFT have like more hours, that's why they can carry over, or?
Sarah, you're muted.
Can't hear you, Sarah.
Nope, still can't hear you.
What now?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, that's weird. Okay. So the MFT applicant has a varied experience in their academic practicum and internship hours. So it just depends on that individual applicant. It's not that across the board all marriage and family therapy programs require more practicum hours than the LPC programs do. But as you heard Mr. Romig explain, the marriage and family therapy board's having to remove that rule because it doesn't comport with the statute. And I don't know what the LPC statute currently has and whether or not it'd be permissible under its statute. I suspect
Probably. I'd agree with that.
I'm looking at it right now. It's got to be 3,000 hours after completion of the graduate program.
Okay.
So there's no way you could, even if the board wanted to, it couldn't put that in its rules now.
Okay, so the LPC, you could carry over hours, but that ended in 2017, right?
It was either 2016 or 2017, but I think it was 2017.
Okay, so LPC can't carry over hours, but LMFTs can.
Until
for now.
Yeah, for now, until
For now.
September 1st of next year.
So those that
Okay.
are in a program right now can continue, but it will cease.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a little unfair too, so, okay, thank you.
You bet. All right. This is our last one. Looks like Tiffany Hampton.
Yay, save the best for last. I just wanted to get some quick clarification on the psychologist compact issue that y'all were talking about earlier, because we are working really hard to get the social worker bill through, and our legislators are meeting me with, what? Not after what happened with the psychologist? No, no, no. And so I want to understand better. You said that their national testing people came out with a second part test. Texas filed some sort of something 2 weeks ago and said, no, we shouldn't have to, this is a national mandate. So I'm hearing you say that in their bill or their laws, it said Texas did not have sovereignty or something. And y'all were like, we're going to file something to stop this. Like, help me understand that a little better so I can speak to it when it comes to the social work side.
Okay, so I think what you're here, I think here's what you're running into. So
Okay.
ASPPB, they are the entity that owns the national licensing exam for psychology. It's called the EPPP.
Gotcha.
In 2022, they came up with a second part to the exam, and they said if you want to continue using the first part, you must also adopt the second part, which is going to cost an additional $450, and it has a pretty high failure rate.
Right.
Texas looked at that because of way we looked at it and we said, look, that's a barrier, as an additional barrier to entry license. We can't afford it right now. We don't want it.
Right.
And ASPPB blew us off for about 2 years. We
Oh.
then filed a motion to change their bylaws that would outlaw them from mandating that. And we also filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission saying you had illegally tied part 1 of the exam to part 2. And that's a no-no.
So how were they able to mandate it when they're a company, a money-making company? How were they mandating that Texas?
They own the exam.
And it's the only exam available.
And it's the only one available. So if we said, and they pointed this out to us, they said, well, you're free to not use the EPPP. And I'm like, well, it's the only thing out there. So I guess I'm really not free, am I? Unless you just want to run around naked without an exam. So
Gotcha.
we didn't have much of a choice. And so that's when we went to the legislature and we started explaining about, needing to develop a new exam. Of course, you got to explain kind of how you get there or why you're asking for this. The problem is ASPPB is so tied to SIPAC.
It's so tied to the SIPACs. Got you.
Yes, they in order to practice under SIPAC, you must get a credential from ASPPB first. And I'm not going to bore you with the details of that, but just know you got to go through ASPPB before you can go to SIPAC.
Gotcha.
And I think what the legislators are seeing is this soured relationship we have between us and ASPPB, and and I'll be honest, they're not wrong in that. I could totally see ASPPB imposing, basically saying, okay, right now you only have to take the EPPP part 1 to get their credential for SIPAC. I could totally see them saying once this new exam comes out, they're going to say, well, now you got to take this reimagined exam, which is both parts before you can get it. And I think probably what legislators are seeing is this is an organization that is taking the choice away from us about what exams to require of our applicants. And because they own it, they have a monopolistic control over that part of the market. And they have taken that choice away from us, and we don't like it.
So my answer, I just want to clarify then, my answer there to them would be what happened with, I'm dumbing this down to kindergarten language. What happened with the psychologist was a money-making company that does their test tried to make everybody take the test, and Texas said no, and we protected that. And we want to assure you that the other 3 disciplines, because all of us are, I'm sure, social workers next, and then LPCs, and then LMFTs, but now social workers have a bill before the legislature that's filed today that says, hey, we want to join the Compact Act, and our legislators are saying, oh no, the psychologists, this, they're so they may ask you in some testimony, Daryl, during the session to explain, right? It's a very nuanced little thing you're talking about is it was the company and the SIPAC are 2 different things.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. I think one thing you kind of have working for you is that ASWB, which is, I think they are the equivalent to ASPPB in the social work world.
They are.
But they haven't done the same bad thing that ASPPB has done, but they're kind of the taint, they could, but the taint of what ASPPB has done is now kind of wafting onto them. The stink from it is kind of wafted onto them. And that is what I think you're dealing with here. is
Okay.
the ledge may be a little scared of, well, if they did it, and here's another profession and they own this exam and there is no other exam out there, are they going to do the same thing to us? And
That's correct.
we put all these social workers in this compact, and
Yep.
now, you know, are we
And then they're going to
shooting
come out with a
ourselves
new
in the other
test and
foot?
tell Texas what to do, and we don't
Yeah.
want that. So
Yeah, and so that rubs them the wrong way, and it would me too. It does me. It wouldn't not wood's not the right word. It does me rub me the wrong way.
oh, thank you. That's the only thing. I just wanted to make sure I understood what I was talking about.
Yeah, that's it.
Thanks.
You might look at ASWB's bylaws, because they have an annual meeting, and every state that uses the exam has a delegate that votes on certain issues and certain aspects, which I don't understand how ASPPB could just dictate when there's, I understood their delegates are supposed to vote on things like this.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on ASWB's bylaws, but that might give some reassurance if you can find a
Yeah.
bylaw or language that says the states get a vote.
Yes, that's a great
Now,
idea. Thank you,
Texas
Sarah.
might not like that, 49 other states could vote away and Texas has to go with it, but they still get a voice.
Yeah.
But it wasn't because all of this didn't happen because the psychologists joined the PsyPact in 2018.
Right.
It happened because of the testing agency.
Correct.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, it really, the fight has nothing to do with PsyPact. PsyPact could just end up being a casualty of it. I don't think the ledge will come in and say, well, we don't want you playing.
They already are, man. I've already met with the important key players, and I'm trying to go give them some answers. I came here today to get them from you.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I was hoping that they wouldn't do anything with PsyPact as a result of ASPPB's.
But we're working on it. We're working on educating them, but we'll see if it even gets heard. As
Okay.
you just announced, 1,400 bills filed yesterday. Wow.
Yeah. We'll all be reading till we go blind, until bill filing stops.
All right. Y'all
So,
have a good day. Thanks, everybody.
thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that is all the hands raised. And it is now 2:03 or something like that. I ain't got my glasses on. I can't see. But I'd like to thank everybody for showing up. We've got about 61 people still online. Really appreciate y'all showing up, asking questions, and just participating in this. It helps us at the staff level too, to be honest with you. Just kind of hear the questions that y'all have. It certainly helps us kind of shape where we think issues are going to go next or what issues are going to pop up. So we really appreciate it. Again, I think I told everybody at the last leadership listening hour, in the months that we have an insights webinar, which is what this is today, I'm not going to do a leadership listening hour. On insights, we have an agenda where we have a certain number of things we talk about. It's usually what happened at the last council meeting. The leadership listening hours are just that. They're just us listening to you, answering your questions. I don't have an agenda of things to talk about. It's just we're here to respond to you. But I'm not going to do two of those things in the same month. But so there won't be a leadership listening hour this month. It'll be next month. But if you have any questions, just kind of be saving them up, writing them down. Unless you just absolutely can't wait, then you can shoot them to us under the contact us web form, and we'll try to get back to you as quick as possible. With that, that's all I have. Unless Sarah, Christina, or Patrick, y'all have anything else? All right. Well, I just want to wish everybody have a good Thanksgiving, and I won't see you probably before then, but we'll see you at the next leadership listening hour sometime in December. With that, thank you very much. Y'all have a good afternoon.